This episode is brought to you by TerraSlate. What if the paper you use every day could survive a hurricane? What if you could print it through any laser printer and write on it with a basic ballpoint pen and it would still be waterproof? Let me introduce you to TerraSlate Waterproof Paper, used and trusted by the NFL, the US military, and Michelin-starred restaurants to survive in the harshest conditions. It prints through any standard laser printer and never rips, peels, frays, or smudges. If your notes, maps, menus, or fieldwork matter, use TerraSlate waterproof paper and you'll never laminate again. Visit TerraSlate.com and order a sample pack today. Welcome to the Love in Action podcast. I'm your host, executive coach, speaker, and author, Marcel Schwantes. I believe that when we show up with our full humanity to work and lead from a place of love, joy, purpose, care, and inclusion, it's going to make a radical difference in your leadership, your business, and your bottom line. This is a show about actionable, practical love, the verb, as a leadership and business strategy. Let's get rolling. Hey guys, welcome back. Glad you are here. I don't make it a habit to have return guests on this show, just being honest with you, but I make it the exception when my belief around leadership and culture and the future of work aligns so perfectly with my own work and my own thought leadership, right? So I put today's guest in that category. I'm going to be speaking with the one and only Mark C. Crowley, who has a brand new book out called The Power of Employee Wellbeing: Move Beyond Engagement to Build Flourishing Teams. Mark makes a bold statement, one that I agree with, and we're going to unpack that. He says the billion-dollar employee engagement industry has failed workers, remaining stagnant for over a decade, despite the constant organizational conversation around it. So it's sort of like, okay, the old skipping records back, in the days when we all had vinyl LPs, and you get that one song that keeps skipping over and over. That's kind of how I feel about employee engagement, right? So Mark is flipping the script in his new book. He reviews that employee well-being, not engagement, is the true driver of workplace performance. And we're going to unpack all that. So who is Mark C. Crowley? Well, by now you should know who Mark is, because his first book, Lead from the Heart, I call it a classic, okay? It's a book every person, every leader especially, should have on their bookshelf. That book is now taught in 11 universities and has ignited a global movement for humane leadership. You may also be familiar with Mark's Lead from the Heart podcast, which reaches 175 plus countries now. I'm a big fan of it. I listen to it all the time. Mark is a UC San Diego graduate, and he lives in one of the most beautiful places on the planet, La Jolla, California. I should know. I once lived in San Diego, just a few minutes from La Jolla. And Mark Crowley now joins us. It is so awesome to have you back. Welcome back to the Love in Action podcast.
Thank you, Marcel. Lovely introduction. Great to be back.
Yeah, good to have you back. Every time you pump out a book, you just know that you have an invitation to come back to the show.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you.
All right, so a second go around here for those of us that are just kind of being introduced to you. What's your story?
That's a great question and a big question. And, it's interesting because it's like the minute I say, well, it's lifelong, I worry that people are going to go, oh my God, am I going to hear like this long and detailed story? But it's absolutely true. And I've learned to kind of condense it for these kinds of conversations, Marcel.
Yeah.
The essence is simply this, that I was raised in a way that, effectively changed my wiring and sent me off in a different trajectory. And it was deprived of love. We'll talk about love later. It was deprived of support and safety and caring and thoughtful direction and empathy and encouragement and all things that relate to the heart, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
And so by the time I started managing people, I was very much aware that even though graduated from a top university. I probably should have been kicked out the first couple of years because my father kicked me out of the house right before, like weeks before college with no money, no support, and I really didn't have a job. And so I kind of had to navigate that. But by the time I got through college, I had figured it out, but I also realized, man, was I deprived of a lot of really important things that could have made my life infinitely more successful at that point in my
Mm.
life, and particularly from a self-confidence and self-belief standpoint. So I started managing people in a way that aligned to a theory that I had. I think it was all unconscious, Marcel, which was what would happen if I gave people everything that I never got and always wanted and believed would have made me more successful and
Mm.
more competent and capable. And so I did that until I was 43 years old. So from the time I was 23, 24 to 43. And when I was 43, a woman that had worked for me for 20 years came in my office and said, like almost like an indictment. It was funny the way she presented it, but it was like, you realize you manage people very differently than everybody else around you, right? And I was like, well, whoa, like what brought this on? And I go, what are you talking about? Well, what she did for me was to trigger an understanding that everything that I had done from a leadership standpoint was driven explicitly by how I was raised. Like I
Mm.
responded directly to it. But the thing was, the reason it took me 20 years to realize it was because when things are going great, you don't look under the hood,
Yeah.
you just keep driving the car. So when she said that to me, she started giving me comparisons to the people around and people around me. I was in financial services, a dog eat dog world, very
Right.
aggressive. And so people were like managing with fear and, hey, Marcel, if you don't hit your goal by the end of the month, we're going to have a conversation. This one guy used to say, I'm taking you to the woodshed. I'm like, what the hell is that? Like everything is fear and intimidation and you can lose your job and people were unstable. And so that led to my first book, Lead from the Heart,
Yeah.
because I started to think that I've discovered something, but what I didn't realize was in the process of leading people that what I had been doing, in my belief, was affecting people so deeply that I was affecting them in their heart. And I found science that confirmed that. And that's why I called it Lead from the Heart. I
Yeah.
paid a woman $10,000 to help me build my platform when I first wrote the book. And she said, you can edit this out if you want to, but this is what she said. She goes, you're going to fucking fail if you continue to use the expression lead from the heart. And so I had to make a decision, and I made the decision to keep the title and to live with it and take the punches, largely because the science demonstrated that the heart is very much involved in influencing our choices and our decisions. And I made the statement that engagement is literally a decision of the heart, which it is. And I think people are finally coming around to realize that everything that I said was true. It just took a very long time for people to get beyond that word heart and not think of it being, this Valentine thing
Right.
or something romantic or something stupid and something misaligned to driving performance. Finally, I think that's kind of where we're at.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there's so many parallels with your work and my work because about the same time, no, you were actually doing this before I was, Mark. And so while you were, you know, toying around with the idea of heart-based work, and then the book comes out, I was a few years after that experimenting with love as a business value, as a leadership principle, right? Love. And I got the same pushback as you did. Like, dude, you're gonna tank. Your business is going to tank if you bring in this whole fuzzy love thing into your messaging. And I stuck with it. And now it's so funny that as your book, your first book, Lead from the Heart, has kind of paved the way for other books to talk about heart type stuff. And then since I started, playing around with the idea that love is very much it's very much a part of how you lead human beings or help them to flourish. You basically you love them well, right? I started to see more books pop up with the titles that had love in it. And to this day, they just keep coming. So I just think that the words that used to be fuzzy and very counterintuitive for the harsh conditions of the business environment are now almost like being introduced into the business lexicon.
I mean, there's still a lot of resistance to it, right? And the word heart has all sorts of triggers for people, and people are leery of it. But I think we have this traditional belief in business that work has to be hard. That you can't
Mhm.
be a person, you have to leave your troubles at the door, and that when you come to work, that it's almost a competition. We use words like headquarters and troops, and like it's a war and
Yeah.
environment, when this is where people are spending the majority of their lives. And so it better be a good experience for them. It should be. And so that's really repels these words like heart and love.
Yeah.
And by the way, there have been, I mean, I've seen it too, that since Lead from the Heart came out, the first version, edition in 2011,
Hmm.
it really happened for a while. But when my second edition came out, all of a sudden now people are using this language of
Yeah.
heart and heart-led leader and so forth.
Right.
But the thing is that to a person, as far as I can tell, everybody means it metaphorically. And I don't. I'm saying scientifically, the heart and the mind are connected, sending
Right.
communication. And the inference of that is that you don't have to get caught up in the worry that heart is soft if you understand that we're really talking about the biology of human beings. We're
Hmm.
just saying align your leadership practices to the way human beings operate, and you will be more successful. That's an easier story than going, you need to bring more heart into the way you lead, because
Right.
people think, I'm going to be abused. They're not going to do their production. People are going to get soft around the middle. I'm going to lose my job. These are all the fantasies that people have. So if you can make the transition from just saying you're just matching your leadership practices to what optimizes other human beings,
Yeah.
people can get their heads around that. And I think that's why this is suddenly being very successful.
You're right. Right. Yeah. We're finally catching up to what the evidence has been telling us over the years. So, okay. So I want to make the link between Lead from the Heart to your current book. And I think, Mark, tell me if you agree with this. I think that even us in the thought leadership, sort of leadership practitioner space, we evolve as well. And so I'm wondering, what have you learned from your journey from your first book that led you now to write a book on well-being, which is sort of a different track than a lot of the engagement topics of your first book?
Well, okay. So I'll push back on it a little bit, because
Yeah.
the interesting thing is that when I wrote the second edition to Lead from the Heart 3 years ago, that was very satisfying to see that everything that I had said remained true 12 years later, right? So the foundational ideas of that book remain absolutely 100% accurate.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it's interesting because in 2013, I write for Fast Company, and I wrote an article, and it was just sort of this like synchronistic situation where I was talking to the head researcher at Gallup, Jim Harder, who
Yeah.
created, interestingly, not just their engagement survey study, but 25, 27 years ago, but also their well-being study. So he sees the connection, and they've seen that connection for a long time. But in the conversation, we were talking about what I was looking for was more validation that people are basically miserable at work, because that would support changing how we lead. And so I just said, do you have anything new? And he goes, well, we're just about to release our American workplace study. And in that study, we've discovered that only 30% of Americans are engaged. And I said, well, my article is going to come out like in the next week or so. Are you okay with me publishing that? And he goes, sure. So he gave me permission. So I was literally the first person in the world to say only 30% of people are engaged at work. And my response to this was the same as everyone else, is like, oh my God, like what a potential we have to turn this around. I mean, can you imagine how much better organizations would perform if we could get people really engaged and supported and feeling really great about work? So I've been an advocate for engagement. Lead from the Heart talks about engagement as being the beneficiary of how we were going to lead. But I was reading, Gallup sends me these updates, and I got this update saying that here's what the engagement scores are right now. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, they're the same as they were 12, 13 years ago when I wrote this article. And it was just instinctive. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yep.
If this is all we can do, we've made no progress in all that time, then what it said to me was that everything companies have done to talk about engagement has there's been nothing to do with doing something about it. It's been perfunctory and
Yeah.
performative. We do a, 2 years, twice a year surveys. And by the time the results get out, the managers that were seeing them, they're like, well, that situation happened 6 months ago. I can't do anything
Yeah.
about that now. Right. And not only that, but we never held anybody accountable. Wall Street never told CEOs it was important. So CEOs go, if you want to do engagement, that's fine. It was all just this check the box, do it and move on kind of a thing. And
Yeah.
it's evident by the numbers. So where I'm pushing back is to say that well-being is a direct outcome of all of the practices that I laid out in Lead from the Heart. So I'm not pivoting here and going in a different direction. What I'm saying is double down on it in a way that says, stop talking about engagement because this is like a pathetic thing that we're now doing in business.
Yeah.
Employees themselves think it's rather insincere because they've never seen any changes. They write down, I work for a boss that's really toxic and I hope somebody will do something about it. And the next, 6 months later, they get another survey, they write it down again. And after enough of these, people are like, why am I filling out these surveys? You're not doing anything with them. And so where it comes down to is that there is now science that proves that there's a direct relationship between how people feel, which is my whole thesis. The whole Lead from the Heart thesis is, ask people how you think, you ask people how you feel because feelings and emotions drive behavior. So when we get down to well-being, we're just asking you, how do you feel about your boss? How do you feel about your growth opportunities? How do you feel about your peers and the people that you work with and your feelings of belonging and connection to that team? All feeling.
Yes.
So everything that I'm talking about in the new book is basically saying, stop talking about engagement because we all know that you never took it seriously. And let's move to well-being because we know there's a direct connection to, performance, optimal performance. And there's another aspect of this that is the most important, which is stop surveying twice a year and survey like on a weekly basis and just ask one question and then drill down on it, talk about it, share the results and make some decisions about how you might make the work experience better. So you're calibrating on a weekly, bi-weekly basis as opposed to not calibrating every 6 months.
Yeah. Hang tight, guys. We'll be right back. This episode is made possible by today's sponsor, TerraSlate. Ever lost a critical handwritten note or a printed document to rain, mud, or time itself? Hate using non-recyclable laminating sheets? TerraSlate Waterproof Paper is built to fix all that permanently. It's waterproof, rip-proof, and virtually indestructible. TerraSlate is recyclable, easy to print on with any laser printer, and can be written on with a basic ballpoint pen. The company's focus on sustainability is evident to its core. The company is powered by 100% renewable energy and was recently named a Denver Broncos Small Business Partner. From ocean dives to mountain summit, TerraSlate is trusted by the NFL, the U.S. military, and Michelin-starred restaurants to perform when nothing else does. If firefighters, engineers, students, and creatives trust TerraSlate in the toughest conditions, you can trust it to protect your work too. Switch to TerraSlate and you will never laminate again. Visit TerraSlate.com and make your ideas indestructible with waterproof paper. Okay, so Mark, let's talk about then this focus now on well-being, and you give some clear key drivers of well-being. Let's unpack what those key drivers are.
Which ones do you want to talk about first? I'm happy to. There's several, so tell me which ones are most.
Well, you pick out the ones that really kind of floated to the top for you.
Well, I think that it really starts with This is another one of these aspects, by the way. After I wrote this, I'm
Yeah.
now seeing people talk about this where we've never talked about it. And I'm finding it really fascinating. Like, it's this idea is in the ether and people are downloading it at the same time. But a lot of the chapters in The Power of Well-Being are things that I'm advising leaders to do that will inherently and directly influence employee well-being. But many of them, I think, will come as a surprise to people because, like, I didn't think to do that. And one of them is the first two chapters of the book is know thyself and know thy values. So, what we don't realize is I had a friend of mine tell me years ago, she goes, "Did you ever notice that most people are operating out of their childhood selves?" And it was just like this epiphany for me because it's like I've experienced this a million times where you see people, you're having interaction with them, and it goes sideways, and you're like, "What did I do?" And then you find out, like, what did I do? Like, I have a nice relationship with this person, but now this person's going completely sideways in this bizarre behavior. And what is it? And you realize that a lot of times what people are playing back in their minds is like you said something to them, or they heard you say something, or they saw a behavior or something, and it triggered something that their brother said to them 30 years earlier that pissed them off. And now you're pissing them off because they're replaying that and has nothing to do with you. So it's interesting, but this is what goes on. We remember our parents and the influence and whether or not they were approval or critical of us, and so we're trying to get more of the love that we were wanting from our parents and avoid the pain that we didn't, and we're bringing this into work. And so the point is that we have beliefs, we have attitudes, we have strategies that we learned in our childhoods that need to be looked at. We need
Mm.
to say, what is it that motivates us? And keep an idea of, do we, are these going to serve me going forward? So I'll
Yeah.
give you an example just to kind of pin this down. So my mom died when I was 9. My father remarried immediately, and neither one of them cared about me, and were really abusive, psychologically, emotionally. My father especially.
Mm.
And so and I was like a high achieving kid. I did everything I could possibly do to get that respect and couldn't get it. It was always something wrong. And so what I did in my career for probably the first 20 years was I worked very, very hard. Like everything was striving, everything was seeking achievement. And I got it. I kept getting those achievements, but it was like, okay, I got to go to another achievement, and I've got to work really hard. And I kind of finally was pointed out to me that, what you're trying to do, your underlying motivation is to prove to your father, who at this point was a ghost in my life,
Mm.
that I had value and worth. And we all do this. We all have these kinds of hidden motivations. So I'm saying take the time, look at your relationships growing up, look at the influences, see how it might impact your behavior, and then make a decision as to, like, do I want to continue to be trying to prove to my father at this point in my life? Like, that's never been a healthy motivation. So maybe it's time to let that go, because the more you know yourself, the better able you are to manage other people. In fact, I'll say that if you don't know yourself, how could you possibly manage other people?
Mm.
You're not well informed. But there's another aspect of this, and I'm also seeing people talking about this, which really surprises me, is you have to know your values. You have to be very, very clear and take the time to define what they are. What do you stand for? So I just wrote this post on LinkedIn. I'll give you a perfect example. So I hired this woman who was one of the most spectacular performers I've ever had. She was phenomenal in front of people. Her experience with customers was incredible, lovely, gracious, and massively successful, like everything she did. So I'm running this big business. She's my number one person. She's number one in the company of 4,000 branch locations, right? But she is a non-collaborator. She is selfish. She is abusive to other people. They're like, "What are you doing? Like, well, tell us what you're doing." She's like, "I don't have to tell you that." And my whole culture, my values were, we are a collaborative team. We look out for each other. We're going to learn from each other. That's, if you want to work here, that's what I'm all about. Right. And so she comes in and she's number one and everybody can see it. And people are coming to me saying, like, she's not living our values. Well, what did I do? I was like seduced by her productivity, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, but she's making a huge contribution. My team is looking at me and they're saying, yeah, but you're being duplicitous here. You're allowing her productivity to let you tolerate a behavior that you've always said was not right. And the minute people said that to me, I realized my values are compromised here and I can't live with them. And I literally had to fire the number one manager in the entire company because of her misalignment and unwillingness to collaborate and cooperate and be a team player. And I look back on that and I'm thinking, that was only because I knew who I was and I knew what I wanted and I knew what culture I wanted. And I was willing to do whatever it took to support that.
Mm,
So somebody said to me that once you've defined your values, Marcel, the decisions are generally made for you. And I find
yeah.
that to be very, very true. So you can be true because people look at you. If I hadn't had any values and I just let this manager continue to perform because she was number one, people would have looked at me like, you don't stand for anything. And
Yeah.
there's no respect you're going to get from people for that. So those would be two that I would call out that I think are off the beaten path, but truly invaluable for leaders to pursue.
I can so relate, and we'll get back to the drivers again because there's one that I want to really touch on. But I can so relate to this. Mark, how many times have I? Can't tell you how many times I've told my clients after we go through a values process or identifying values and reinforcing values and embedding the values into day-to-day operations, how we make decisions, and then like in your example. I've had clients that have that one rock star that is producing and that person's almost untouchable. And it takes so much courage for an executive or a high level leader to stand up to that person because they are violating the culture. They're violating the things that protect the culture. And so I always say to in my executive coaching sessions, that's one of the things you have to do is you have to protect the culture. And the way to do that is to look at the non-negotiables, right? So it goes back to the values. The values are your non-negotiables. If somebody is violating your values, the way that keeps people safe and contributing at a high level because they know that they can trust their leaders, and then somebody is taking advantage of that by walking over the values and not upholding it, then that person needs to be dealt with. And so I'm with you on that one. It's like
Well,
uphold your values and protect the culture.
I think it's really important to point out that it's the leaders who, in the absence of values, will wobble on this. So, in other words, it's very easy to say, I'm going to keep a high performer. I don't really care what her behavior is because I have a high performer and I'm getting rewarded for my performance, not for culture. Right.
Mhm.
So, this is, I think, really important. And then the other is that organizations betray values all the time. They're just platitudes on the wall most of the time because nobody's holding managers themselves accountable, leaders accountable
Mhm.
who are living the values that are on the wall. And so people look at them and they're like, stop playing games with me. Like none of this matters here because in other words, somebody in organizations has to be paying attention to this and rewarding managers and leaders who embody values so that they actually become embodied into the organization as opposed to people just cynically looking at it and going, that's all a bunch of bullshit that's up on the wall there
Yeah.
because nobody lives to this. And under stress and pressure, all of that stuff falls away. This is the stuff that just undermines well-being and it undermines engagement, ironically.
Yeah.
People just like, I don't trust you people because of this.
Yeah. All right. Fill in the blank for me. The single greatest driver of employee well-being is.
Well, I don't know the answer to that question. This is a cool one because this is all about heart. It's all about connection and it's belonging. And so, and it's a much more complicated thing than just the idea that that people need to have a connection. It's an inclusion of psychological and emotional safety, where people actually individually feel safe being part of a team, that they are welcomed for who they are, that they are valued for their ideas, and then they're also respected for who they are personally. So we're talking about nationalities, we're talking about tribes, we're talking about political beliefs or sexuality or religions or whatever. What people are wanting and needing is to feel that they are allowed to be who they are. And there's a lot of pressure against this right now in our society right now, where you've
Mm.
got media outlets sort of, spewing hate and saying we need to hate the other side, and
Yeah.
another one saying you need to hate the other side. It's hard to bring the belonging sense into work when all you're hearing all day is, this other group over here is going to ruin the country, and if we don't win, and the other side is the enemy. And then you bring those people into work and you're like, wait a minute, they're on that other side, how can I possibly respect them? And it really comes down to accepting people for who they are. You hired them into your organization, and we shouldn't be having political conversations or religious conversations or sexuality conversations. That stuff is really not part of the workplace. But to recognize that we're all different and we're all unique and we all bring different talents to the workplace, that's the mindset of belonging. And there's another, which is going back to this example of this manager that I had to let go. It's leaders recognizing the importance of having a cohesive team. So when people started coming to me and saying, you're playing games here with what you've told us is important to you, I was like, you're right. Like, I got seduced, but I'm going to be unseduced. I'm not going to allow this to happen. And these are the things that are really important to people, is to understand that as a leader, that you are looking out for the best interest of the team and making sure that people feel part of a team and that they have each other's backs. These are all components of belonging, and they happen to be the number one driver to your question of
Yeah,
employee well-being.
that's great. So I want to talk a little bit about chapter 9, because you mentioned the areas of uncertainty and ambiguity, and how important that is for leaders to embrace. Now, that's risky territory, I think, for many who lack the courage to delve into those territories of uncertainty and ambiguity. So, why should we accept these things as maybe a way to strengthen our leadership, stretch ourselves in this area of well-being? Make the connection for us.
Well, I mean, if you just think about the world we're living in right now, it's the most uncertain and ambiguous time in my life. And I mean, every day you're seeing things happen that we've never seen before, and it's creating. I mean, we've got a mental illness crisis in this country that is often driven by, uh, like, what's going to happen kind of a thing, right?
Yeah.
And so, from a leadership standpoint, if are flapping in the wind on what's happening and getting, oh my God, what happened here, and what are we going to do now, and that we're judging every brushstroke, and we're looking at situations and we're saying, what are we going to do, and I don't know what's going to happen if that's not only destabilizing, but it undermines your own well-being, because you're sort of marinating in fear and anxiety, and right. So it's not good for you personally. But from a leadership standpoint, we look to our leaders to go, hey, let's be hopeful about this. Let's try some things here. Let's see what we can do. We're not going to get overwhelmed by this. It's going to be okay. This will get through. This kind of language creates well-being in people, but
Hmm.
only if the leader has it in themselves. So it starts off with two things that I think are really important. One is that the idea that we can control outcomes in our world has always been a massive illusion, and yet we try to do it, and so we have great plans and lots of details and project managers and stuff. But, when you see what comes out of those processes, invariably there's failure, there's setbacks, there's time delays, there's cost overruns. And yet we still should be doing that. We should still be doing the best that we can. But if we accept that things aren't going to go well, if we almost anticipate that they won't, when they don't go well, we don't go, oh my God, like, well, Paul Bill in here, he's responsible for this, and let's shoot Bill. Or, so we got to blame someone for this because this shouldn't have happened. Or we go, what are we going to do now? Now we're cooked, now we're screwed. The leader who can say, hey, this isn't the outcome we wanted. Let's stop and say, let's realize that it's not working. And let's figure out what we do now. What's plan B?
Yeah.
That is a much more enlightened way to respond to life in general, but especially in leadership. And this is punctuated by Jeff Bezos, who, in a letter to his shareholders like 25 years ago, brilliantly said that there are two kinds of decisions that leaders make: one-way doors and two-way doors. And one-way door is, like a marriage. I'm getting married. You make that decision. You can't go back and open up that door and go back out, right? You've made the decision. You've got to live with it. So if you're going to spend $10 million on something, that 10 million you can't get back if you buy a business that fails, right? So those are the kinds of heavy, important decisions that you need to take a lot of time with. But he says, but most decisions that we make are two-way doors. And that you go in, so you say, I think this is going to work. Let's try this. And you go through and you're like, it failed miserably. So you go, we're not screwed here. This isn't the end of the world. We just learned something. This strategy isn't going to work. So let's go back through the other door, figure out an alternative, and go forward. So think about that in a workplace. So you have an employee come to you and they say, I want to try this campaign. I want to do this. I want to do this effort. And you say, okay, have you thought it through? What's your plan? What's your budget? All those kinds of things. And they go do it. And they come back to you and they go, my plan failed. We're not working. Well, a lot of leaders will then just go, well, then what did you do wrong? And, I'm going to have to let you go, or you're going to get a demotion or something, some major punishment. But if that person comes to you and says, this is what I'm thinking of doing, and you think it's a good idea, and they've got their plan well, you said, well, why don't we just experiment? Let's try it in a small setting and see what we learn and see if it works. And if it does, we can expand on it. Instead, we go out with big campaigns and then they fail. And then people feel, oh, we need to punish somebody, or, this is a massive failure and now we're cooked, as opposed to saying, let's just keep experimenting and learning. And that's the culture that we're creating. So what beneficiary of this is people, because they don't have to be in fear that if something doesn't work out, that they're going to get in trouble. Because if they fear they're going to get in trouble, they're not going to have the initiative to come in and say, this is what I'm thinking of doing, and why don't we try this? And so the well-being aspect of this is that people feel good about coming in and saying, I was thinking maybe we should do this. And that doesn't mean you have to approve everyone, but you're creating an environment where people can be much more innovative and creative and participatory, which is, of course, a huge driver of what? Well-being.
Yeah. And Mark, I can't help but just notice how obvious it is that you are connecting the dots back to feelings and emotions being such drivers of well-being, how people feel about their work, what they're contributing, and how they feel about their leadership, which is going to raise their performance, right? And the other thing I noticed that I wanted to really point out, and I want my listeners to really get this, is that well-being is not something that you do out there. You have to make the link between, or you have to align your inner world, how you feel about yourself. So that's why know thyself is so important. That's why knowing your core values is so crucial in this equation, because you have to truly know yourself to elevate your own well-being before you go out there and help other people, find their purpose and bring their best selves to work.
Well, it's interesting. You triggered a couple things. One is that I've worked for some people, one person particularly, and I had a management consultant tell me, just so you know, FYI, your boss is massively threatened by you. I had seen this behavior and didn't understand it. And then when this person said this to me, it was like, oh, that's what's going on here. And I came to find out, interestingly, just to tie a bow around this, that that manager was someone who never really heard, "You're doing great." It was always, "This is good, but you can do better." And so the feeling threatened goes back to, wait a minute, this person is doing better and I don't like that. Like there's an emotional response, so as a
Mhm.
leader, you don't want to be threatened by your own people. You
Mhm.
never want to be in that position. But this is a person who never looked to see what his influences were. And the influence was specifically that that he grew up with somebody who was, it's never quite enough good. That's good, Bill. I'm making the name up, but I think you could do better. So that meant that people who were doing better became the competition because the dad could easily just go, look over here, Joe's doing better than you, and Mary's doing better than you. So people that were doing really good work were a conflict for him because it made him feel like, I'm not going to measure up.
Hmm.
And if he had understood that, he would have been much more willing to just keep going. You're helping me. I work for him. That's the amazing thing, right? He's the beneficiary of any good work that I was doing, but we get into this sort of conflict.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this whole idea of how many of us can't, I mean, you're a perfect example of having been raised in an abusive environment and how you were able to do the work to sort of recover from those things, from that trauma emotionally. And I tend to wonder how many leaders are still stuck in that frame of mind, sort of like the victim mode, because they haven't had closure from their own abuses and traumas. And so now they're letting those things dictate how the way they lead and decisions that they make.
It's a
Hmm.
really good insight. It's interesting because I mean, when I speak invariably, because I tell the story of how this is how I learned to lead this way. And, you know, men particularly come up to me afterwards and it's like, "Psst, psst." They don't want to do it in front of others, but they're like, I had your upbringing.
Mm.
And, I've learned to say, okay, just to be fair, you didn't have my specific upbringing because this was very unusual on mine. But what you're telling me is that there was a conflict there. Like you felt like you didn't get what you needed. And I think that's what's universal.
Mm.
Somewhere along the line, you didn't get what you needed from your parents for whatever reason. And in some cases it's abuse, but some cases that you didn't get enough attention or you didn't have to get direction or they have spend time with you or whatever. But you're bringing this up again, and people might think, oh, this is psychiatry, but it's not. It's just human nature. So you don't have to be abused, is the point that I'm trying to make, to actually have things that are dragging you, holding you back. Wayne Dyer said, "Don't let the wake drive the boat." And a lot of us do that because
Mm.
we're so locked in emotionally to, I didn't get this, not always a victim, but sometimes a victim, to use
Mm.
your language.
Mm.
But either way, it's like, take a good hard look at it and go, oh, like now I understand why. And this interferes with all of our relationships, not just at work. But once we understand ourselves and we can free ourselves of the things, like when I recognize that, okay, I've spent the majority of my life up until this point being motivated to prove to somebody who's not even in my life, who's never even going to see the success. It's like, maybe I can let that go. And by letting that go, I'm much more empowered because now my motivations are very different and much more healthy. If we all did that, if we all just found out what limitation is holding us back, we're going to lead people in a very different way.
Yeah, yeah. Mark, as we wind down here, what's one question that I have not asked that you wish I had asked that's pertinent to this discussion?
Um, I'm on the spot for that one. Let's see here. Let's say, why do I believe that this is going to happen? So when I wrote Leaf from the Heart, people there was in 2011 when that book came out. I was certain that CEOs were going to embrace the science because it hadn't been brought out. I was tapping into medical science and positive psychology that was just emerging, and the combination was so powerful. And why it wasn't embraced initially was because CEOs said, you know what, I climbed the ladder, I stepped on toes, and I got there, the top by having this aggressive, sort of kill before you're killed mentality kind of a thing. And I want that culture. I don't want people being soft and taking advantage of it. So they didn't. They didn't. CEOs were very reluctant to change how people were managing and leading, even tied to the science. But going back to the beginning of this conversation, engagement has always been something that benefited companies. So if I work for you and you said, Mark, we're hoping you'll be more engaged, it's like, what's in it for me? Like, what do I get? You get more discretionary effort for the same amount of money you're paying me. I don't get any real benefit generally for your getting me to be more engaged. So this was always for the company's benefit, shareholders' benefits, et cetera, managers. But if I came to you and I said, Marcel, as your manager, I'm interested in finding every possible way I can to support your well-being, you're going to go, bring it on, man. Like, yeah, like I'm on board with that. Right. So if organizations look at leadership as a win-win as opposed to a win-lose, like where people are here to be exploited, if we're saying we want people to get something meaningful from here, and it's not just a paycheck, and we do that in a very sincere way in the way we manage people, not only do we know that it leads to optimal performance, but it's really a orientation that is going to benefit the organization in ways that they've never seen before. Because people get up in the morning on a Monday, and a lot of people just shoot me instead of making me go into that office. I can't take going in there. And if we have people that are just excited to be there because they have a sense of belonging and connection, and they have a manager that generally cares about their well-being and demonstrates that to them, they're going to naturally and instinctively invest in their productivity. And so the bottom line answer to your question is that this is a bottom-up driven cause. Employees want this, and
Yeah.
that's why our workplaces will change as a result of this.
Yes. Beautifully stated. All right, friend, strap on the seatbelt. We've arrived at our speed round. Here we go. A great book that you will read or have read multiple times.
Autobiography of a Yogi.
Oh, okay. All right. Who is someone that inspires you right now?
Emerson.
Something quirky nobody knows about you. And now lots of people will know about it.
Quirky?
Yeah.
I don't know if this is quirky, but I get up at 4:30 every morning and walk on the beach in the dark every morning.
Oh man, that's something that most of us wish we could do if we only had a beach to walk.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I said in my introduction, I used to live not far from La Jolla. I was actually closer to PB than I was to La Jolla. But I was up. No, actually, I might have been close to.
Weren't you?
I was up in, I lived in the UTC area before I got married. And during my first marriage, I was up in the Bankers Hill area overlooking the airport.
Great.
So whatever beach is closest to that. All right. Name a person dead or alive that you would like to have dinner with.
Abraham Lincoln.
Nice. All right. In the age of hate and division, because that's where we are now, what's the best way to bring humanity together?
Tolerance, acceptance, kindness.
Short supply, isn't it? Very good. And lastly, your biggest hope for the rest of 2025. There's only 2 months left.
Yeah, there's only two months. My biggest hope, well, I'll speak to your audience here and say, I hope they'll buy my book. The thing is that I realized in doing this work that, I mean, I think you know this. There are people that just produce books to make money, and
Yeah.
that's their goal, right? And I'm doing this really to change consciousness, to change workplaces, to change a whole philosophy that's endured over 100 years. And I'll just finish this and tell you that I was walking on the beach one day, and I'm coming off the beach, and this word primer, this is in the book, but this word primer hit me, and I was like, what's that? Like, I don't even use that word. I don't see that word. And it led to, like, I realized, like, I've got to explore this. This is my intuition telling me. I made the decision. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a primer. It's a very concise book. And so it's like it was confirmation to me that, like, this isn't all about me. Like, this was the universe handing me this gift and saying, this information, you've been living this information, we've given you this information, and now we want you to give this information to people that can actually influence a major change. So that's what I'm hoping for the rest of this year. People
That's great. That's great.
embrace
Well, congrats. You have survived the speed round.
this.
All right, Mark, we bring it home with two questions as we do with every guest. You may have had these the first time around. I'm not sure. So here they go. The first one is the leading with love question. So sticking with themes of well-being and engagement, how do I lead with more actionable love day in and day out?
I think it's I end my podcast. You know this. I've ended it for almost 8 years, saying love your people.
Mm,
But the idea of that isn't that you go up and go, I love you, man, and come here, I got to give you a hug, or it's really demonstrated to people. That's the answer. Let people feel it. You never need to ever say, I love you. You can, if you have that relationship with people and that works for you,
yeah.
that's fantastic. But for anybody who's skeptical, for anybody who thinks I'm not bringing there, I'm not going there, I'm not ever talking about it, I'm saying you don't need to. You just show people that you care about them, that you're thoughtful about them, that when you make decisions, you think about how they're going to land. I had an assistant for 15 years. She graduated magna cum laude from Marquette University, and she was brilliant. And I would not send out an email or any communication until I went to her and said, tell me what's wrong with this. Tell me. And she'd say, would you want people to feel this? And I'm like, no. So she says, well, then you better change it. So before I would send things on my own instinct, I would consider, how am I making people feel? I literally wanted people to feel something very positive, very upbeat, very optimistic. And there were times where she's like, you better go back and redo this because this is not going to achieve what you want to achieve. And so it's just being thoughtful about people so that every interaction you're having with them, you're having an opportunity to make a positive influence, as opposed to having people be fearful or feeling anxious or feeling a sense of ambiguity of, like, am I in trouble here? Is my boss not happy? Am I not doing good work? Anything that you can do to make people feel something powerful, positive, supported, cared for, those are all expressions of love.
Mm. All right, you close us out, Mark. What's that one thing that you want people to take away from our talk?
That the work experience should not be something that people dread,
Mm,
and that organizations, interestingly enough, when we started to see, it was like 20% of Americans quit their job in the 18 months after offices opened, after COVID. And you like, why would that many people want to get the hell out of their companies? Is because they made the decision that I got to get the hell out of this company. And what companies did was they were like, oh, well, I guess we need more recruiters and we need more trainers. And we're just going to have to, like, tolerate higher turnover. That's the nature of the game. And I think finally companies are going, this is stupid. Like, we're losing all of that organizational knowledge. We're going to have to retrain people. And often it takes a couple of years before people become competent the way the person who left was. And it's also brutally expensive. And there's also evidence that shows, that teams that are connected for a long time, so there's no turnover or very little, are actually much more successful than teams that turn over. So what's happening now is I think finally HR and companies and CFOs are going, this is nonsense. We've got to stop this. So the only way you're going to stop it is by creating an environment where people want to belong. And the only way you're going to do that is by changing the leadership practices and emphasizing employee well-being. So I'm certain that this is the moment where you've got the business demanding that we have better outcomes. And from my knowledge, the only way you're going to get there is by changing how we lead and manage people. And the way we change leadership and management is got to be oriented towards the human being that we've been managing all this time and supporting their needs, and not just selfishly supporting our own.
Great closing remark. Folks, the book again is called The Power of Employee Wellbeing, Move Beyond Engagement to Build Flourishing Teams. Mark, I want to send a whole bunch of people your way. Where can they go to connect with you, learn more about your work, maybe book you for a speaking engagement?
Thank you, sir. MarkCCrowley.com. So there's a guy in Ohio. When I first wrote the book, I found out I can't be Mark Crowley anymore. So I am Mark C. Crowley. Some guy who's doing leadership work. So I adopted the C as my middle name, Christopher. And so MarkCCrowley.com, all roads lead to me there. You can connect with me on Mark C. Crowley on Twitter, Mark C. Crowley at LinkedIn, and of course, Amazon for The Power of Employee Wellbeing.
Yes, and I'll make sure that that's in my show notes as well, folks, so you can click on it from there. Mark, I'm telling you, it's always an honor, and I mean this in the truest, most authentic way I can express myself. But I learn from you. I look up to you. You inform my work, and I'm truly like I'm a big fan. So it's always. And I look at you I know that you are a peer. We're like peers in the same kind of arena, trying to shape the future of work and change the leadership aspect. But I'm like, I'm talking to Mark Crowley today. I'm going to be a sponge because it's going to make me better. And folks, I hope it has made you better as well. Get this book. It is truly a page turner, full of research and data points for you to apply to the workplace. Mark, thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcel. Lovely seeing you.
And I want to thank our sponsor today, TerraSlate, for making this episode possible. TerraSlate Waterproof Paper is waterproof, rip-proof, recyclable, and prints through any laser printer. Trusted by the NFL, U.S. military, and top restaurants, TerraSlate performs in the toughest conditions on water or land. Visit TerraSlate.com and order a sample pack today. For Mark Crowley and yours truly, remember, in the end, love always wins. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your leadership and business flourish.